I have a question for you. And by a question, y'all know by now that I mean a few questions because, I never have just one. So, what is Black information? Or if we already have Black information, how do we turn it into data? I am asking these questions because I recently watched a documentary called Coded Bias, which chronicles the sort of origin story of Joy Buolamwini's Algorithmic Justice League as she begins to tackle the reification of racism in algorithms and computer learning. There are actually several Black people who have taken up the call of algorithmic injustice. Joy Buolamwini founded the Algorithmic Justice League, and scholars like Ruha Benjamin have studied how technology hasn't made life more equitable or been advantageous for Black people, but has extended the capacity and capabilities of racist institutions. What's worse is that the idea that computers or even data is objective or objectively produced bolsters the idea that conclusions these algorithms and computer learning endeavors come to are completely legitimate. We have seen time and time again in the news where an algorithm or AI has rendered racist and or sexist results. We've seen this in programs created to aid in hiring, in medicine, in loan approvals, in college admissions, in determining prison sentences, which goes to say that decisions that are life-altering, decisions that can influence your quality of life, decisions that can influence your financial situation, or even decisions that can decide the quality of your relative freedom are being left to supposedly purely rational machines that can't really be said to be biased, but still produce biased results. So, for a computer with no allegiances or alliances, without the ability to be coerced into a decision or decision, for a program with no impetus or motivation to make a certain decision, what does it mean that they still replicate the kinds of violence that Black people have experienced from regular everyday humans? Maybe something is wrong with information and knowledge itself. Maybe how we view learning, logic, and reason is the problem. And actually, I'm going to go a step further and say that perhaps learning, reason, logic, as they are founded and formulated in this particular world, are anti-Black. Now I know y'all are like, oh shit, this nigga is nuts. Honestly, I'll take that. The violations against Black people are absolutely irrational in that they have no cause, call, and happen without provocation or a necessary genesis. And thus far, we haven't been able to pray it away, educate it away, or dress for Sunday it away. So I'm thinking that any kind of redress, or even a move toward redress, will have to exist outside of the realm of anything we've known thus far. And anything that exists prior to or outside of the logics that we currently use to make the world make sense to us is going to appear crazy, because as of yet, we've developed no prior foundations to even understand such an undertaking. I personally find this undertaking to be absolutely necessary and urgent, as the sheer belief in computer objectivity and the certainty of data is leading more and more people to rely on computer learning, and it, along with the logics and biases that they will inevitably extend, will be more prevalent in more aspects in our lives. So then what is the answer? Honestly, largely, I don't damn it know. However, what I do know is that a very quick thought experiment I formed allowed me to see very quickly why certain conclusions are made by these supposedly objective programs. If I were a blank slate, or a slate that was preconditioned in a Western way to absorb information, tons of it, tons of data sets and points, and then draw conclusions and search for any number of trends, what would I learn about Black people? We know what the data says about us. We have names for this data. We call it wealth gap, achievement gap, prison overrepresentation, higher infant mortality rate, higher incidence of death from preventable diseases, likelihood of getting approval for certain kinds of loans. And the data sets go on and on and on. If we believe that knowledge, what we can know about a thing, about a group of people, about a situation, is able to be verified through evidence, then these kinds of reports, these statistics, and the narratives that we create around them are what is able to be learned about us. So according to data, Black people are almost always either deficient or excessive in pathological or stereotypical ways. These comparative logics are absolutely necessary for us to be able to understand inequity and garner evidence of this part of our experience in the world, but it's not the totality of our experience. As a matter of fact, if a computer were to learn that this is what a Black is, or what the Black experience is, what it is actually learning is not what it means to be a person who is now called Black. It is learning what others have constructed around and for us. But the narratives created, or the ways of understanding this data, never correlate this information with the creators of these circumstances. So in terms of knowledge to be learned on paper and in data points, Black people especially are pathology. Moreover, what this does is, without having to explicitly name it, is makes white people the standard. And it paints a picture of all people and all things in relationships determined by white people, which means that the only world presented in data is the white world. A world that is also assumed to be legitimate and objective. If I were to perhaps say this another way, where is the data that points to the illegitimacy of whiteness, Westernity, and this very brutal modernity? Where is the data that chronicles the worlds and sets of wisdom and knowledge of non-white peoples, pre- and post-colonially? Where are the competing sets of knowledge that would serve to adjudicate the production of modern Western knowledge? Because we have assumed that evidence must be formulated through numbers and statistics, and we've created languages that hold these kinds of data, the question must be asked: is it possible to create programs that can learn in the ways that the indigenous peoples of the world learned, or translate indigenous knowledges into the kinds of data that these algorithms and programs understand? Until we are able to answer this question, a very big assumption about data and computers is actually more dangerous. The assumption of objectivity. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make, and that we do make, is to think that data is objective without taking into consideration the fact of desire that is deeply psychoanalytic and often pre-consciously manifested in this world. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, let's view one of many brutal stories. I want to preempt this with a trigger warning for the brief description of a lynching. In May 1916, a white woman was found clubbed to death in her home. The culpability for her death and supposed rape was quickly put on a young Black farmhand, Jesse Washington, who was 17. He was arrested by a white sheriff, placed in a white jail, and a trial was quickly put together with an all-white jury. Guilty or not, this Black teenager was already doomed. The system in place was efficient and effective at sealing his fate. Now, this would be the systemic analysis. Jesse existed in a place where all the arbiters of justice were white and thusly never really stood a chance to determine or truly fight for his own fate. The next part, however, is where a systemic analysis fails. After a guilty conviction, the white crowd that had gathered to the tune of 10,000 were not pleased with just dooming Washington. They abducted him, tortured him, burned him, And they did all of this while casually talking among each other. White children coming from school took to the trees to get a better look. What the hell is that part? What is the thing that makes people take pictures for postcards, allows them to eat prepared lunches as though they are at an event for entertainment? What makes them want to have their children watch these spectacles? And so for us, how do you create the data to describe that? What conclusions would a computer come to not only understand, but critique the set of desires that allow for these incessantly brutal acts of violence, and also the mundane, everyday acts of violence committed against Black people, that understands that existence or being itself is the mundane violence lived by Black people? That there is an underlying desire and psychological need for Black suffering is also the truth of the current world, and Black people know it. But our knowledge, this knowledge has no external evidence in the way of data sets to back it up. Even outside of the harrowing, the terroristic, the horrific, the brutal, what Black people also know is that we are uniquely gifted to create and imagine like none other. That improvisation is a mode of Black knowledge and creative production. That Blackness is extra, and we laugh big and celebrate even bigger because we embody a capacity for joy, rage, love so big that fleshy borders can't always contain it. That we are masters of locating our bodies within space and time, which explains why Black countries seldom need tons of traffic signs and lights, and why there is literally no Black musical genre that I can think of that doesn't also include some form of dance. So I want to ask you again, what is Black information? Or if we already have Black information, how do we turn it into data? And I'll add this question. If AI is necessary, how do we create computational languages and learning strategies that can accommodate Black music, Black dance, Black storytelling, Black poetry, Black interiority? How can we put forth in knowledge that can be operationalized a Blackened world, or at the very least, the current world with the Black perspective of it? Many scholars have suggested that we need better representation in the STEMs programs and among engineering professionals that produce these algorithms and computer learning platforms and other programs. Others suggested that we need more empathetic programmers. But if from what we saw earlier, learning and knowledge itself may be the issue, then perhaps we need whole new systems of knowledge creation and frameworks for learning and computing. And that's if that is even possible, given the overdetermination of deeply seated anti-Black psychological needs. All of this is to say that perhaps there are ways that we need to begin imagining how we approach information and understanding and learning so that computers can learn from us instead of just about us. As always, I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to leave your comments below. Also, please share, like, subscribe, and visit our website and Patreon to get updates on how we're moving and to support us in building Blackly imaginative community.